Hello everyone, in today's video I will be narrating stories that I found off of Reddit. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But without further ado,
let's get straight into these stories.
it was a regular Tuesday evening, and I had stopped by the grocery store after work. Just a quick trip, some eggs, bread, maybe a frozen pizza if I was feeling lazy. The store wasn't busy, just a few other shoppers shuffling through the aisles under the dull hum of fluorescent lights. Everything was normal, until it wasn't. I was in the cereal aisle when I got that feeling, you know the one, that strange, crawling sensation on the back of your neck, like something is watching you. I glanced around. There were only two other people in the aisle, a woman scanning the granola bars and an elderly man who seemed completely absorbed in reading the ingredients on a box of oatmeal. But the feeling wouldn't go away. If anything, it got worse. I turned back to the shelves, pretending to be engrossed in picking a box of Cheerios while I tried to shake it off. That's when I noticed it. The boxes, they weren't right. It took me a second to figure out why they fell off. Every single cereal box on the middle shelf was turned slightly, not straight, not pushed back evenly, just tilted at the exact same angle. It was like they were all leaning forward, watching. I reached out and nudged one back in place. The moment my fingers touched it, every single box on the shelf shifted forward again. Not violently, not like they were falling, just smoothly in unison, like they had been reset to their unnatural position. I took a step back, my breath hitched. The woman down the aisle kept looking at the granola bars, completely unaware. The old man was still reading his oatmeal box like nothing had happened. I reached out again, this time pressing harder, pushing the boxes all the way back. Every single one. I stepped back, watching. They didn't move. I let out a shaky breath. Maybe I was just imagining things. Maybe I was tired. I turned to walk away, and all the boxes lurched forward at once. I didn't see it happen. There was no slow tilt, no gradual motion. One moment they were fine, the next they were all leaning again, perfectly synchronized. My stomach dropped. I felt it then, something standing behind me, close, right against my back. I read, and I don't remember checking out. I don't remember walking to my car. I just remember getting home, locking my door, and standing in my kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs. A few weeks passed, and life moved on as it tends to do. The eerie experience at the grocery store became one of those unsettling memories you shove to the back of your mind, convincing yourself it was just a trick of the imagination. But then it happened again. I was at a different store, a big box retailer on the other side of town. I had almost forgotten about the cereal aisle incident until I found myself in the household goods section, looking at storage containers. As I debated between a clear bin with a locking lid and a cheaper, flimsier option, that familiar prickling sensation crawled up my spine. The air around me grew heavy, like the store's climate control had suddenly failed, leaving a thick, oppressive atmosphere. I turned, scanning the aisle. It was just me, alone, or so I thought. One of the storage bins on the shelf shifted, just a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. I blinked, focusing harder, when another bin, 3 rows down, did the same. Then another, and another, each container nudging slightly forward, as if to peer over the edge and get a better look at me. My breath hitched. The plastic lids clattered softly against their bases, the sound almost lost under the store's music, but distinct enough to send my pulse racing. I backed out of the aisle, refusing to turn my back on those bins, and nearly collided with a store employee. She gave me a curious glance, probably assuming I was just another frazzled shopper. I mumbled an apology and rushed toward the checkout lanes, abandoning my cart in the middle of the store. It was later that night, lying awake in bed, that I remembered something else, something small but disturbing. The cereal boxes and storage bins weren't just tilting forward, they were leaning toward me. The days that followed brought no relief. The sensations, those creeping, skin-prickling sensations, started happening in places they shouldn't. The books on my shelf at home, the chairs in the break room at work, even the shoes by my door would sometimes seem slightly askew, angled just enough to feel like they were focused on me. One evening, I decided enough was enough. I had to confront this, whatever this was. I stood in my living room, every object neatly in its place. I spoke aloud, voice trembly but firm. I don't know what you are, but you're not welcome here. Silence, then a subtle, almost imperceptible shift. The picture frame on the wall tilted, the corner dipping just slightly as if nodding. The days turned into weeks, and the feeling never left me. Every room I entered, every store, every waiting area, I could feel it. The shift, the almost imperceptible tilt of objects, as if whatever was behind this was growing more comfortable, more confident. I tried to ignore it, to pretend it wasn't happening. But then, one night, it escalated. I was brushing my teeth, exhausted from another restless night. The mirror fogged up slightly from the warm water, and I glanced up, dreading my own reflection. That's when I saw it. Not behind me, not in the corner of the room. In the reflection, on the sink, my toothbrush holder, my soap dispenser, the cup I used to rinse. They had all shifted forward, not at an angle, not slightly askew. This time, they had moved right up to the edge of the counter. My pulse pounded in my ears as I slowly turned my head away from the mirror to look at the counter directly. Everything was in its normal place. I looked back at the mirror, shifted forward. Something was wrong with the reflection. I took a shaky step backward, and my reflection did the same. But the objects on the counter, they didn't move back. They remained at the edge, closer, waited. My breath caught in my throat. I turned the faucet off with a trembling hand and flicked off the bathroom light, unable to bear seeing any longer. That night, I barely slept. Every noise in my apartment felt amplified, every shadow stretched just a little too long. The next day, I took drastic action. I rearranged my entire apartment. I moved the furniture, shuffled books, and placed random objects at different angles, anything to break the pattern, to throw it off. For a few days, things sounded okay, maybe even normal, until I woke up to the sound of something dragging across my floor. I bolted upright in bed, my chest tight with fear. My apartment was silent, but I knew what I had heard. I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight. Everything in my room was exactly as I had left it. The chair in the corner, the bookshelf, my desk. No, not exactly. The chair. It had been facing the window when I went to bed. Now it was facing me. My heart pounded as I flicked the light on, backing toward my bedroom door. I told myself it could have been my imagination. Maybe I had left it like that. Then I stepped into the hallway, and I froze. Every single piece of furniture in my apartment, every chair, every lamp, every stack of books had turned face up me. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I just stood there, my skin crawling, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Then, in the silence, I heard it. A single, deliberate click. The bathroom door was open just a crack. But now, it was opening. Not suddenly, not violently, slowly. Something on the other side was pushing it. I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were filled with cement. The door creaked open an inch, then another, until the darkness of the bathroom yawned before me, and then a single object slid across the floor. My toothbrush. It stopped just at my feet, perfectly parallel to my toes. I don't remember the rest of the night. I woke up in my car. I don't know how I got there, but I was parked outside a 24-hour diner. The clock on my dashboard read 4:12 a.m. I went inside, shaking, barely able to order a cup of coffee. The waitress gave me a concerned look but didn't ask. Maybe she saw people like me all the time, people who looked like they had seen something they couldn't explain. I haven't been back to my apartment since. I packed a bag and checked into a motel, but I know I can't stay here forever. I don't know what to do, because now, even here, in this unfamiliar room, something doesn't feel right. I moved into a new apartment, nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom in an older complex on the outskirts of town. Rent was cheap, and the landlord seemed nice enough. The only real downside was the thin walls. I could hear my upstairs neighbor pacing at all hours of the night. At first, I assumed they had insomnia or maybe worked odd shifts, but the pacing never changed. It started every night at exactly 2:13 a.m. and ended at 4:26 a.m. No variation. No pause, just a slow, steady rhythm of footsteps moving back and forth across the ceiling. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I went upstairs to introduce myself and maybe joke about their late night workout routine. The door at 3B looked normal enough, but when I knocked, the sound echoed strangely, like the apartment was empty. No lights were on inside. I knocked again. No answer. I went back downstairs, feeling uneasy. I hadn't seen anyone enter or leave 3B since I moved in. Maybe they were just a recluse. Maybe they were out but had a pet pacing around. I tried to put it out of my mind. Then, a week later, I ran into my landlord in the hallway and casually asked about my upstairs neighbor. His face went blank. "There is no one in 3B, he said. Hasn't been for months. Apartment's empty." I laughed, thinking he was joking, but he didn't laugh back. That night, I stayed up, waiting. At 2:13 a.m., the footsteps began, steady, deliberate. I grabbed a broom and banged on the ceiling. The pacing stopped. For the first time in weeks, the apartment was silent. I exhaled in relief until something knocked back, not from the ceiling, from the floor, directly beneath me. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep much at all after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I swore I felt the floor move under me, like something was shifting, stretching, settling into place. I moved out 2 weeks later. A few months after I'd moved out, I tried to put the whole thing behind me. I told myself I had imagined it. Maybe it was old pipes, or settling wood, or something totally explainable. But late at night, I'd still wake up to phantom footsteps in my mind, that steady, measured pacing. Then, last week, I got a call. It was an unknown number, but something in my gut told me to pick up. A woman's voice, soft but panicked, came through. "Did you live in 2B?" My mouth went dry. "Who is this?" "I just moved in," she said, ignoring my question. "Hi, I need to know." The footsteps. "Did you hear them too?" I almost hung up. Almost. But instead, I asked the only question that mattered. "Did you knock?" Silence. then so quiet I barely heard her. Yes, my stomach twisted. What happened? I whispered. She took a shaky breath. After I knocked, they started coming from inside my apartment. A chill crawled up my spine. I thought maybe it was just the building. She continued, her voice barely holding together. But then, I don't know how to explain it, the walls changed. Like, the whole apartment stretched. The walls pulled back. The floor felt softer, like I wasn't standing on wood anymore. My hands clenched into fists. Did you leave? She let out a small, broken laugh. I tried. The door wasn't where it was supposed to be. I pressed the phone to my ear, waiting. Eventually, it let me go, she said. The door came back, but I don't think her voice caught, and when she spoke again, she sounded like she was crying. I don't think it wants me to leave again. The call ended. I don't know what happened to her. I tried calling back, but the number was disconnected. I thought about going back, but I knew in my gut that wasn't a good idea. I tried to forget about the call. I really did. But a few nights later, I woke up to my phone ringing again. Save unknown number. I didn't answer. It rang again and again. By the fifth call, I gave in and picked up. At first, all I heard was breathing. Then, so faint I almost didn't catch it, the woman whispered. It moved again. My heart pounded. What do you mean? The apartment, she said, voice shaky. The layout is wrong. The hallway is longer. The kitchen is a sharp inhale. There's a door here now that wasn't here before. I sat up in bed, gripping the phone. What's behind it? A pause. Then the soft creak of a door hinge. Then nothing. Hello, I asked. The line crackled, and then I think it's a room that shouldn't exist. I swung my legs out of bed, already searching for my keys. I wasn't sure what I was planning to do. Maybe go back to the building, maybe call the cops, but something in me needed to know. But before I could stand, she whispered, there's someone in here. A spike of ice went through my chest. I gripped the phone. Get out of there, right now. A pause. Then, I don't think it's a person. The line winked dead. I called back over and over. No answer. The next day, I drove past the building. The windows of 2B were dark. No lights, no movement, just stillness. I asked the landlord about the woman who moved in. He gave me a confused look and shook his head. No one's rented 2B since you left. He said, I felt sick. That's not possible. I talked to her. He just shrugged. Nobody's there. I went back that night, stood outside the building, and looked up at the window of 2B. Dark, empty. But as I turned to leave, I saw it. Just for a second, a flicker of movement, deep in the shadows of the apartment. My family had just moved into a rental house while my parents were figuring out a job relocation. It was a small, older place, nothing fancy, but it had one of those old school basements, the kind with concrete floors, exposed pipes, and that cold, damp smell that never goes away. The only thing down there was the laundry machines and some old shelves left by the previous tenants. The basement light was one of those pull chain bulbs, and the switch at the top of the stairs didn't work, so you had to descend a few steps in the dark before you could reach it. Not ideal, but whatever. One afternoon, my mom asked me to switch the laundry. I groaned but wigged down. As I reached for the chain, I heard this low, drawn-out sigh, like someone exhaling slowly. I froze. It was so faint that I thought I imagined it, the kind of sound you could explain away if you really wanted to. Maybe it was the house settling. Maybe it was the water heater. Maybe I was just being paranoid. I yanked the chain. The bulb flickered on, and everything looked normal. The old, ugly floor, the dusty shelves, the washing machine swishing quietly. Then I noticed something weird. The clothes in the dryer, they weren't moving. I don't mean they had finished tumbling. I mean they were just sitting there, still, like someone had placed them inside and never turned it on. But I'd heard the dryer going before I came down. I was sure of it. The second I stepped closer, the sighing sound came again. Not from the water heater, not from the vents. It came from inside the dryer. I didn't even breathe. I just stood there, my skin prickling all over, staring at that stupid metal door. Then, the clothes shifted, not like they fell or resettled. They moved, like something underneath them was shifting. I ran so fast I tripped on the stairs and nearly slammed face first into the door before scrambling up and bursting into the kitchen. My mom saw me pale and breathless and asked what was wrong. I told her I thought there was an animal in the dryer. She sighed and went down herself. 2 minutes later, she came back up and gave me a look. There's nothing in there, she said. I made her check again. Nothing, just a load of damp clothes that she was sure I had forgotten to start. I knew I'd heard the dryer running, and I knew something had moved inside it. The next time I had to do laundry, I left the basement door open. As I reached for the chain, I heard it again, the sigh. After that night, I avoided the basement as much as I could. I made excuses, left chores half finished, anything to keep from being down there alone. But my parents weren't having it. My dad especially. He chalked everything up to kid imagination and told me to stop watching scary movies. So the next time laundry needed switching, I tried to compromise. I waited until my older sister, Emily, was home. She was 16 and basically lived on her phone, but at least she'd be in the house if something happened. I'm just doing laundry, I told her as I hovered hovered near the basement door. Stay in the kitchen? Okay. She barely looked up from scrolling. Why, just stay. She rolled her eyes but nodded. Good enough. I took a deep breath, flipped the basement latch open, and stepped down. This time, I turned the light on before I reached the bottom. The bulb buzzed to life, and nothing looked out of place. The machines hummed like normal. No weird noises. No sight. I exhaled and opened the dryer. The clothes were warm, fully dried, and nothing was moving. Maybe I'd been imagining things before. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Then, from above, click, the basement door shut. I whirled around so fast I nearly tripped. Emily, no answer. I sprinted up the stairs and grabbed the handle. Locked. That door never locked from the outside. It didn't even have a lock. I pounded on it. Emily, silence. The machines kept humming behind me. The old pipes ticked softly in the walls. But then I heard it, right next to my ear. The sigh, not faint this time, not distant. It was right beside me. I spun so fast I nearly fell down the stairs. The basement was empty. Then the light went out. I lost it. I was slamming against the door, screaming for Emily, my breath coming so fast I thought I might pass out. Then, just as suddenly as it had locked, the door swung open. I fell forward onto the kitchen floor, panting. Emily stared down at me, phone in hand. What's your problem? She asked, annoyed. I looked at the door. It was wide open. Just like that. You locked me in, I said. She raised an eyebrow. Dude, I never even moved. I shook my head. You shut the door. She sighed, grabbed the edge of the basement door, and waved it lightly. Sylvan, it doesn't even lock. You psycho. And she was right. It swung easily. No latch, no keyhole. No way I should have been trapped. No way the sign had come from right next to me. No way the dark had felt like something was moving toward me. I never told my parents, and I sure as hell never went back down alone. But sometimes, when I lay in bed at night, I'd hear it. I stopped going into the basement after that. No amount of parental scolding or teasing from my sister could make me do it. I'd rather wear dirty clothes for a week than step foot down those stairs again. My parents were annoyed, but they mostly let it go. My dad still thought I was being dramatic. My mom assumed I was just afraid of the dark, and Emily, well, she liked to mess with me. For the next couple of weeks, every time I passed the basement door, she'd sigh dramatically and whisper, it's coming for you. I hated her, but even she stopped joking about it after what happened next. One night, around 2 in the morning, I woke up to a sound. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, a faint thump from somewhere below, maybe the pipes knocking. Nothing unusual. Then I heard it again, a slow, dragging sound, like something heavy was being pulled across the basement floor. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. I wanted to believe I imagined it, maybe a truck passing outside, or my dad shifting in his sleep. Then came a sigh, not from the basement this time, from the hallway, right outside my door. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just sat there, frozen, listening. The sigh was slow, heavy, long, and then my bedroom door creaked open. I nearly screamed, but the sound caught in my throat. I yanked the covers up to my chin, staring at the doorway. My room was dark, the hall even darker, but I could just barely make out a shape. Something stood in the doorway. Not my mom, not my dad, not Emily. It was too tall, too thin, and it was breathing. A long, slow inhale, a longer exhale. I don't know how long I sat there, shaking, my whole body cold with fear. I wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. Then, in one slow, unnatural movement, the shape slid backward into the hall. That walked, slid, like it was being pulled away by something I couldn't see. The second it was gone, I dove for my bedside lamp and switched it on. Light flooded the room, and my doorway was empty. The hall was empty, but the basement door was wide open. The next morning, I told Emily. I expected her to laugh, but she didn't. She looked pale, quiet. Then she said, I heard it too. She wouldn't tell me more, but from that night on, she stopped teasing me. She started locking her bedroom door at night. She stopped going near the basement. We never talked about it again. A few months later, we moved. My dad's job finalized, and we left the rental house behind. I should have been relieved, but on our last day, as I passed the basement door one last time, I swear, from the darkness below, I heard it. I live in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where nothing ever really happens. My street is lined with identical little houses, each one a different shade of beige or gray. A place where people mow their lawns on Sundays and kids ride their bikes in the summer. The house next door, though, that house had been empty for years. Or at least, I thought it was. It started with small things. Lights in the upstairs window, just a soft, flickering glow like someone had a candle burning. I noticed it while taking out the trash one night, but by the time I went back inside and peeked through my kitchen window, it was gone. The trick of the eyes, maybe. Then there were the noises. Muffled thumps, like something shifting around inside. Not every night, just often enough to make me second guess myself. Maybe the wind knocking something loose. Maybe a raccoon got inside. That was possible, right? I told myself it didn't matter. The place had been abandoned for as long as I could remember. No one came to check on it. No for sale sign. No renovations. Just a house frozen in time. And then one morning, as I was leaving for work, I noticed something else. The front door was open, not wide open, just a crack, like someone had nudged it and forgotten to close it all the way. The air was still, no wind to blind me. I stood there for a moment, staring at that dark sliver of space between the door and the frame. I should have ignored it. I should have just gone to work. But curiosity got the better of me. I stepped onto the porch and leaned in, just enough to call out. Although, nothing. The inside was dark, the kind of dark that felt wrong for the middle of the day. Like the house itself swallowed light, I could hear something deep inside. Not movement, not voices, just a sound, a soft rustling like fabric shifting, a slow, rhythmic inhale and exhale. Breathe in. I turned and walked away. I didn't run, didn't slam the door, didn't do anything to let whatever was inside know that I had heard it. I just walked back to my house, locked the door, and sat at my kitchen table, waiting. The door was shut when I checked again. That was 3 weeks ago. I don't look at the house anymore. I lay there, frozen, my breath caught in my throat. The sound was soft, barely noticeable over the hum of the ceiling fan, but once I heard it, I couldn't unhear it. A slow inhale, a slow exhale. I wanted to tell myself it was just my imagination, that I was half asleep. My mind played tricks on me, but I wasn't. I was wide awake, and that sound wasn't coming from inside my head. It was coming from the closet. My body screamed at me to move, to get up, turn on the lights, do something, but I couldn't. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, willing the noise to stop, praying that it was something, anything, other than what my mind was telling me. The breathing continued, and then, so quietly I almost missed it, a creak, a shift in the wooden slats of the closet floor, like someone adjusting their weight. That broke whatever trance I was in. My hand shot out, fumbling for my phone on the nightstand. I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to move a muscle, but my fingers found the screen, and I swiped at it blindly, unlocking it just enough to turn on the flashlight. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen, and then I turned it on and aimed the beam at the closet door. Nothing. The door was closed, just like it had been when I went to bed. No movement, no shadowy figure creeping toward me. Just an old wooden door, shut tight, but the breathing was still there. It wasn't a trick of the wind. It wasn't my mind playing tricks. It was there, steady and slow, just behind the door. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at it. The logical part of my brain screamed at me to get up, open the door, prove to myself that nothing was there. The rest of me, the part that knew better, refused to move. Eventually, the breathing stopped. I don't know how long it took, but at some point, it just faded away, like whoever or whatever was making it had lost interest. I stayed awake the rest of the night. My phone flashlight pointed at that closet door, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did, but in the morning, when I finally worked up the nerve to check, I found something. The closet door was unlocked. That might not sound strange to you, but here's the thing, I never leave it unlocked. The old latch has a tendency to swing open if it's not secured, and the last thing I need is my cat getting inside and making a mess. Every night before bed, I lock it. I know I locked it, and yet, when I pressed my fingers against the old metal latch, it slid open effortlessly. I opened the door. The closet was empty. Nothing inside but my old coats and some boxes. No sign of anyone, no footprints in the thin layer of dust on the floor, no disturbance in the way my things were stacked. But I swear to you, as I stood there staring into that closet, I felt it. A breath. Not a sound this time, not something I could hear, something I could feel, cold and damp, whispering against my cheek. I slammed the door shut and locked it. I told myself I wouldn't think about it anymore, wouldn't let my mind linger on that night, on the breath I felt against my skin. But the thing is, once something like that happens, you can't just forget. I avoided my bedroom that day, didn't step foot inside except to grab some clothes, spent most of my time in the living room, keeping the TV on just for the noise, anything to keep my thoughts from drifting back to that closet. That night, I slept on the couch, or at least, I tried to. At some point, I must have dozed off because I woke up to a sound, not breathing this time, something else, a creak, not from the closet, from the hallway, right outside my bedroom door. I lay there, my body suddenly ice cold. The house was dark, the only light coming from the dim glow of the TV. My eyes locked onto the hallway, my ears straining for anything. Silence, then another creak, slow, deliberate, like someone was shifting their weight. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. My heart was hammering so hard in my chest I thought whoever or whatever was out there might hear it. I reached for my phone. My fingers felt numb, but I managed to grip it, flipping on the flashlight. I pointed it toward the hallway. Nothing. The light spilled into the darkness, revealing the empty stretch of floor, the slightly open door to my bedroom. Everything looked normal, except for one thing, the closet door. It was open, just a crack. I knew I locked it. I know I did. But there it was, open just enough to see the sliver of blackness inside. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then, as I stared at it, the door creaked open a little more. I read, didn't think, didn't hesitate. I bolted for the front door, yanking it open and stepping out into the cold night air. I didn't stop until I was halfway down my driveway, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. From the street, I could see my house, the warm glow of the TV flickering through the window. In my bedroom, in the closet door, wide open, I stood there, shaking, not knowing what to do. Then, movement. Not a person, not a shadow, just the door. Slowly, steadily, it began to close. Not slamming, not swinging, just inching shut, like something on the other side was pulling it closed. I stayed outside until the sun came up. I haven't slept in my bedroom since. I don't go near the closet, and I don't know who or what is in there. I was in the hospital for a routine appendix removal. Nothing major, just an overnight stay. I woke up around 3 a.m., groggy from pain meds, and realized I needed to use the bathroom. The room was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from the monitor beside my bed. The nurse had told me earlier that if I needed help, I should press the call button, but I felt okay, sore, but manageable, so I swung my legs over the bed and carefully stood up. The bathroom was just across the room, but as soon as I stepped toward it, the entire space shifted. It's hard to describe, but the air felt heavier, like I had walked through a curtain of static. The floor suddenly felt, well, it wasn't the smooth hospital tile anymore. It was almost soft, like stepping onto wet carpet. I blinked. The room wasn't dark anymore. It was too bright. White walls, white floors, white ceiling, but the light had no source, just an endless, sterile glow. The beeping at the heart monitor was gone. My bed was gone. The bathroom door was gone. I turned around, expecting to see the hallway outside my room. Nothing, just a vast, white space stretching in every direction. I wasn't in my hospital room anymore. I called out, hello. My voice sounded muffled, like I was underwater. I took a step forward, and the ground sank beneath my feet, squishing slightly. A sickly sweet smell filled the air, like antiseptic and something rotting underneath it. I started to panic. I turned in circles, looking for anything, any door, any sign of where I had come from. My breath echoed unnaturally in the empty space. Then I saw it, a figure in the distance. Not a person, not really. It was the same color as the walls, bone white, barely distinguishable except for the way it tilted its head. I took a step back. It took a step forward. I blinked. It was closer. Too close. Like the distance between us had skipped. My stomach lurched. I turned and ran. The floor squelched beneath me, that sickly sweet smell growing stronger. My legs felt heavy, like I was pushing through thick water. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. And then I was falling, not like tripping, not like stumbling, just dropping straight down, like the floor had vanished beneath me. I braced for impact. I hit something hard. Pain shot through my body, and when I opened my eyes, I was on the hospital floor. My actual hospital floor, cold, smooth tile, just outside the bathroom. The beeping of the heart monitor filled the air again. The dim yellow glow of the room's nightlight was back. Everything was normal, except the hospital gown I was wearing was wet, and the smell of something sickly sweet still clung to me. I scrambled back into bed, shaking. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, when the nurse came in, she frowned. Did you get up last night? I hesitated, then nodded. She pointed to my fate. You weren't supposed to walk without help. She said, you must have slipped. But she hesitated. It's weird. There was a puddle right outside your bathroom. We don't know where it came from. I didn't tell her anything. I was discharged that afternoon. But to this day, I can't shake the feeling that wherever I went that night, it wasn't a dream. I tried to move on. I really did. After I got home, I told myself it was just the pain meds, a hallucination, a fever dream, anything but real. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had left something behind, or worse, something had followed me. It started small. The first night back, I woke up to the faintest sound of dripping, like a leaky faucet. But when I got up to check, the bathroom sink was dry. So was the shower. So was the kitchen. Still, the sound persisted, a slow, rhythmic plip, plip, plip. I convinced myself I was imagining it. Then came the smell, that same sickly sweet antiseptic scent. Not quite rotting, but drug, like hospital disinfected trying to mask something decayed. I deep cleaned everything, laundered my sheets, scrubbed the floors, but no matter what I did, the smell lingered. And then the bruises. They appeared one morning, dark smudges along my ankles, as if fingers had wrapped around them. I didn't remember bumping into anything. That's when I started sleeping with the lights on. A week passed. I avoided thinking about the hospital, but it never really left me. The bruises faded, the smell came and went, the dripping sound. Well, I just tried not to listen. And then one night, I woke up. It was 2:47 a.m. I remember because my phone was still in my hand. I I had fallen asleep scrolling through Reddit, trying to distract myself, but something had woken me. A sensation, like I wasn't alone. My bedroom door was open just a crack, enough to see the dark hallway beyond. My eyes were still adjusting, but I swore I saw movement, something pale. I reached for my bedside lamp, hand trembling. I clicked it on. The hallway was empty, but my bedroom floor, it was wet, a puddle glistening in the light. That water, something thicker. I pulled the covers over my legs, my breath coming fast. The smell was stronger now. That sharp, cloying antiseptic mix was something that made my stomach churn. Then, a creak. The hallway floor. The air went still. My entire body locked up. I couldn't see anything, but I knew I wasn't alone. And then, from the darkness, flip, 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 that same dripping sound. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the blanket like it was a shield. My mind raced. Maybe if I stayed still, it wouldn't see me. Maybe. Another creak. Closer. I opened my eyes, and my bedroom door swung open, but there was nothing there. Just more wet footprints leading from the hallway to my bed. I didn't sleep after that. The next day, I did the only thing I could think of. I called the hospital. I didn't even know what I was going to ask. Maybe about the room I stayed in. Maybe about any unusual incidents. But when I gave my name, there was a long silence. Then the woman on the phone said, "I'm sorry, but I don't have any record of you staying here." I laughed nervously. No, I was just there last week. Appendix removal. Room 305. Another silence. Room 305. She finally said, yes. She hesitated. That's impossible. Room 305 hasn't been used in years. My stomach dropped. What? I whispered. There was a... She stopped. There was an incident years ago. A patient disappeared. The room was sealed off for renovations, but they never finished. My mouth went dry. I checked the hospital's website after that. There was no room 305 listed on the current floor plan. I don't know where I was that night, or what found me there. I didn't go back to the hospital. I didn't call again. I didn't want to know more. I just wanted to forget. But the thing about something like this is, you can't. No matter how much you try to push it down, pretend it was a dream, tell yourself you imagined it, it doesn't leave you. And it didn't leave me. A month passed. The footprint stopped. The smell faded. I convinced myself it was over. And then, one night, the power went out. I was in my living room, scrolling through my phone, when the TV flickered once, twice, then the entire apartment plunged into darkness. I sighed. Just a blown fuse. I figured. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, and that's when I saw it. Water, a dark, glistening trail of it, stretching across the floor from my bedroom door to the center of the living room. My stomach turned to ice. I hadn't heard anything, hadn't seen anything, but the trail was fresh, leading from where I slept every night. I stood up, heart pounding. My body screamed at me to run, to get out, but I made the mistake of looking up, and I saw it. Just for a second, the pale, human-shaped figure standing in the dark corner of my apartment, its skin blending into the walls, almost invisible except for its eyes. They weren't eyes, not really, just holes, hollow, black, and endless. It tilted its head, just like before, and then I blinked, and it was gone. The power flicked back on, and the TV blared static. The apartment was silent, but the wet footprints remained. After that, I left. I didn't pack. I didn't clean. I just grabbed my keys and ran. I stayed with a friend for a while. I never told them why. How do you explain something like that? Hey, remember that hospital I stayed in? I think something came back with me. You don't. You just live. But I know it's not over, because sometimes, on quiet nights, I still hear it. Flip, 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 like water dripping from an unseen source, like footsteps coming closer, and I know it's waiting for me to come back. I was house sitting for my aunt while she was out of state. It was an old place, built sometime in the late 1800 seconds, with creaky floors and those weird, narrow staircases that twist in on themselves. The house had 3 floors, but the top floor had been closed off for as long as I could remember. My aunt always said the stairs leading up there were unsafe, so she just kept the door locked. I never thought much of it until the second night. I was in the living room watching TV when I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, on the floor above me. My stomach dropped. I was sure the 3rd floor was empty. Nobody had been up there for years. At first, I thought maybe an animal had gotten in somehow, but these footsteps were heavy, human heavy. I turned off the TV and listened. The steps moved across the ceiling, then paused right above me. I grabbed my phone and called my aunt, trying to stay calm. When she picked up, I whispered, "I think someone's in the house." She was quiet for a moment, then said something that made my blood run cold. "Or did you hear the footsteps?" I told her. Her voice was completely steady when she said, "That's impossible. The 3rd floor doesn't have a floor anymore." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The stairs collapsed years ago. She continued. There's nothing up there but open beams and empty space. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The footsteps started again, crossing the room above me, and I swear to God, I heard something dragging along with them. Then, a single, loud knock on the ceiling, directly above my head. I ran out of the house without even grabbing my shoes. I sat in my car, shaking, until my aunt's neighbor, a retired cop, came over with his gun and searched the whole place. He found nothing. When I went back inside, the house was completely silent, but as I passed the door to the third floor, I noticed something. The dust around the locked door was disturbed, like something had been standing there, pressing against it. A few months passed after that night, and I tried to put it behind me, but the feeling never left. Every so often, I'd wake up in my own apartment with that same tightness in my chest, that sense that something was listening. Then my aunt called. She sounded casual at first, asking how I was, but I could tell there was something else, something she wasn't saying. Finally, she just sighed and got straight to the point. I don't want you to panic, but I think I need to ask you something. I gripped my phone tighter. Okay, did you go up to the third floor? I felt sick. No, you told me it wasn't safe. Another pause. Then, very quietly, she said, that's what I thought. I could hear her moving around, opening drawers, shifting things. Finally, she spoke again. I had some guys in to look at the foundation last week. They had to check the support beams in the walls. When they got to the third floor, they called me up to look at something. I waited, my whole body cold. They showed me the dust. She said, nobody's been up there in years, but there were. She hesitated. They were footprints, bare footprints, going from one side of the room to the other. I felt my stomach twist. They stopped at the edge, right where the floor isn't supposed to be anymore. I was silent, and here's the thing, she continued. There was dust piled in the footprints, like whatever left them had been standing there for a long time. Just standing, watching. I couldn't breathe. I don't know what's going on in that house. My aunt finally said, but I don't stay there anymore. I moved out last month. I didn't want to tell you until I was gone. She let out a slow, shaky breath. But here's the part I can't stop thinking about. I swallowed hard. What? The third floor door. The one that's been locked all these years. She hesitated. When I left, I found it open. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Then, just before she hung up, my aunt said one last thing. I locked it, you know, the night before I left. I locked it twice. I never went back to that house. And mother did she. A few weeks later, it was torn down. But sometimes, late at night, I still wake up to the sound of footsteps. I wish I could say that was the end of it, that the house was torn down, the thing, whatever it was, gone for good. But it wasn't. A few months after the house was demolished, I got a text from an unknown number. It was just an address, nothing else. I ignored it at first, assuming it was a wrong number. Then, a few nights later, my phone lit up again. Same number, same address. Furious, I looked it up. My stomach dropped. It was the empty lot where my aunt's house had been. I blocked the number and tried to forget about it. But then, the dream started. In them, I was back in the house. Except it wasn't how I remembered. Everything was too dark, too stretched, like the walls and floors were pulled too thin. But I always knew exactly where I was. The third floor. I would wake up standing in my own bedroom, drenched in sweat, heart hammering. Sometimes, I'd hear faint creaks above me, like the sound of weight shifting, like something was moving on a floor that wasn't there. One night, I woke up outside. I was standing barefoot on pavement, staring at a construction site. It took me a second to realize where I was. The place where the house used to be. I have no memory of getting there. Panicked, I ran back to my car, which was parked a few feet away with the driver's side door hanging open. My keys were still in the ignition. My phone was in the passenger seat. The screen was on and one unread message. Save unknown number. No words. Just a photo. With shaking hands, I opened it. It was a picture of a staircase. Old, wooden, narrow, twisting up into darkness. And at the very top, barely visible, something stood in the shadows. Watching, I deleted the message. I changed my number. I moved across the country, but sometimes, in the middle of the night, I still wake up to the sound of footsteps. And when I look at my phone, there's always a single unread message. No words, just a picture of a staircase. I was shopping at a grocery store I don't usually go to, one of those big warehouse style places with high ceilings and a weirdly quiet atmosphere. The store wasn't empty, but it wasn't busy either. It had that weird liminal space feeling, like time wasn't moving at the same speed inside as it did outside. I was just there for a few things: milk, eggs, cereal, the basics. As I walked down the aisles, I noticed something strange. Every time I picked up an item, a quiet but distinct voice would say a number. What? I froze. The voice was soft, but clear. It was as if it was coming away from the air itself, not from any particular direction. I looked around, no one near me, no intercom announcements, just the distant hum of refrigerators and the occasional squeak of a cart. I shook it off. Maybe it was my imagination. I grabbed a box of cereal. 2. I dropped the box. The voice wasn't loud, but it was there. I looked around again, scanning for any signs that someone was messing with me. But the nearest shopper was an old woman struggling with a can of soup 2 aisles over. Trying to stay calm, I picked up the cereal and placed it in my cart. I told myself it was just one of those weird brain glitches, the kind where you think you hear your name in a crowded room. Then I grabbed a loaf of bread. 3. My hands started shaking. This wasn't normal. It wasn't random noise. It wasn't my imagination. Something, somewhere, was counting. I tested it. I walked away from my cart, down a different aisle, and picked up a bottle of juice. 4. I dropped the juice and backed away. My heart was pounding now. I looked at the other shoppers. No one else seemed to notice. No one was reacting. I thought, maybe it's the store's intercom picking up some weird radio signal. Maybe an employee had a walkie-talkie. Maybe. But then I did something I regret. I walked to an empty aisle, one with nothing I needed. I reached out, hesitated, and then picked up a can of beans. 5. I dropped it. The voice was closer, not louder, closer. I left my cart behind and speed walked to the front of the store. I didn't even care about the food I came for anymore. I just needed to get out. I didn't tell anyone at first. I mean, how do you explain something like that without sounding crazy? Hey, the grocery store counted my groceries and then whispered in my ear. Yeah, no thanks. But it stuck with me. The feeling of that last 6, spoken right next to me like someone standing too close. I kept telling myself it was just some weird glitch, a trick of the intercom, or my brain playing games. Until a week later, I had no choice but to go grocery shopping again. I went to a different store, of course, a smaller, busier one. Plenty of people, plenty of noise. Safe. I kept things simple, just enough to get in and out fast. Milk, eggs, bread, no hesitation, no wandering. I made it through most of my list without hearing anything. Then, in the cereal aisle, I reached for a box of Cheerios. 7. I nearly screamed. I dropped the box, knocking over 2 others in the process. A woman at the other end of the aisle gave me a look like I'd lost my mind. No, 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 no. This isn't happening again. I backed away from the cart, hands shaking. The store was loud, full of people, but the voice had been right there, close, like it had never left. I ran. I left my cart, just like last time. I barely remember paying for a random bottle of soda at self-checkout, just so it wouldn't look like I was bolting for no reason. But I was. The voice had followed me. I stopped grocery shopping after that. I started ordering my food online, getting deliveries. Anything to avoid being in a store, picking things up, making the number go higher. Weeks passed, no counting, no whispers. I thought I was safe. Until last night, I was in my kitchen, unpacking my latest grocery delivery. It was fine at first, just unloading things like normal. Then I grabbed a can of soup. 28. I dropped it. The can hit the floor and rolled under the counter. My whole body locked up. The voice hadn't come from behind me. It hadn't come from the air. It had come from inside the bag. Something is keeping track. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the grocery bag like it might start speaking again. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, that whatever had been counting hadn't just followed me. It was getting closer. 28. It had jumped. The last number I heard was 70. I hadn't been in a store for weeks, so how the hell did it go from 7 to 28? I thought about everything I had bought since I started getting deliveries. Hadn't been counting every item, didn't know what I was touching, even if I wasn't in a store. The thought made my stomach twist. I needed to test something. Slowly, carefully, I reached for a banana from the grocery bag. My fingers barely brushed the peel when I heard it. 29. I threw the banana across the kitchen. My breath came fast and shaky. The voice wasn't louder, but I felt it closer, like the space around me had shrunk. I sat there, not moving, for what felt like an hour. My hands were cold. My stomach was in knots. I needed to stop this. I needed to stop whatever this was before it got to. I didn't finish the thought. I grabbed my phone and called my mom. It was late, but she picked up groggily. Honey, what's wrong? I swallowed hard. No, do you ever hear counting? She was quiet for a second, then she gave a sleepy laugh. What? Counting? Like in your head. I hesitated. No, out loud. When you pick up things, groceries, another pause. Then, in a much sharper voice, why would you ask that? Something in my chest tightened. Mom, I said slowly, have you heard it? She exhaled, and I heard her shifting on the other end of the line like she was sitting up. When did it start for you? She asked. My blood went cold. I couldn't speak. My mouth opened, but the words stuck. You need to listen, she continued. Her voice was urgent now. You need to stop touching things. Don't go to the store. Don't let them deliver to you. Don't buy anything. Just stop. I gripped the phone tighter. My hands were sweating. Mom, what happens when it stops counting? I whispered. She didn't answer right away. Then, in the softest voice I'd ever heard from her, she said, it never stops. A click. She had hung up. I didn't sleep at all. I just sat in my kitchen, staring at my half-unpacked groceries, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. Not that night. But the next morning, my doorbell rang. When I looked outside, there was no package, no delivery person. There was just a small, white piece of paper. I picked it up, hands shaking. There was nothing written on it. Nothing except a single, neat number, 30. I dropped it like it burned me. My breath hitched. The voice didn't speak this time. It didn't need to. It wasn't anything fancy, just a few wooden cabins, a mess hall, and a big lake where kids could swim or canoe. Most of the staff stayed in their own separate cabins, but sometimes, when we had too many campers, we'd sleep in the large communal lodge with the kids. One night, toward the end of the summer, I got assigned to stay in the lodge with a group of younger campers, maybe 10 or 11 years old. There were about 12 of them, all zipped up tight in their sleepy bags on the wooden floor, their chaperone snoozing softly on a cot by the door. At some point in the night, I woke up to the sound of shuffling fabric. It was the unmistakable noise of someone adjusting in their sleepy bag, the nylon rustling against itself. I opened my eyes, expecting to see one of the kids sitting up or rolling over, but in the dim glow from the emergency exit sign, I saw that everyone was still lying down, completely motionless. Then the shuffling sound happened again. It wasn't a single noise, it was multiple, a shifting, a settling, like a room full of bodies getting comfortable at the same time. I sat up slowly, my pulse picking up. I scanned the room, 12 sleeping bags, all filled, all zipped tight up to the kids' chins. No one was moving. I listened. The sound came again, closer this time, and that's when I realized the sleeping bags weren't just full. They were too full. Some of them bulged in places they shouldn't. A knee here, an elbow there, protruding unnaturally high, pressing out against the fabric as if something inside was trying to get comfortable. My stomach turned. I counted the kids. I whispered their names under my breath, scanning their peaceful faces. 12 kids, all accounted for, and yet the sleeping bag shifted near the far end of the room. The fabric rippled, bulged, then settled. No one inside it moved. I sat frozen, staring, my breath caught in my throat. Then, from somewhere deep in the bag, I heard a sigh, not a child's sigh, something else, something lower, something that should not have been there. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I didn't dare move. I just sat there, wide-eyed, listening, waiting for something else to happen. By morning, when the sun finally rose and the kids started stirring, the lodge looked normal again. The morning routine went on as usual, kids stretching, rubbing their eyes, crawling out of their sleepy bags groggily. I kept scanning them, looking for any sign that they had felt what I had felt the night before, but they were oblivious, chatting about breakfast and their plans for the day. I moved through the room stiffly, checking each bag as the kids got up. My hands trembled slightly as I unzipped the last few, half expecting to find something, anything, left behind. But there was nothing, just warm, empty sacks of nylon and padding. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. After the campers filed out for breakfast, I approached the chaperone, a tired-looking counselor named Mark, who had slept in the cot by the door. Hey, I said, keeping my voice low. Did you hear anything weird last night? Mark blinked at me, still waking up. Weird hell, like movement in the sleeping bags, but not the kids. He frowned, rubbing his face. I mean, kids toss and turn, man. I shook my head. Not like this. Mark sighed and looked around the now empty lodge. Then he did something that made my stomach drop. He turned and counted the sleeping bags. His lips moved silently as he did, and when he reached 12, he stopped. He was making sure. Did you count them last night? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His jaw tightened. He didn't answer right away. Yeah, he admitted finally, and a long pause. Then, there were 13. The cold wave rolled over me. I opened my mouth to ask more, but Mark just shook his head. I thought I was tired, miscounted, but when I checked again in the morning, just now, there were 12. We both stood there in the empty lodge, the morning light streaming through the dusty windows, the air between us thick with something unsaid. Neither of us wanted to ask the real question. Neither of us wanted to know the answer. Neither of us spoke for a long time, and the sound of kids laughing outside, the clatter of breakfast trays in the mess hall, the rustling of wind through the trees, it all felt too normal after what we had just acknowledged. Mark exhaled sharply, rubbing his face again. Look, man, maybe we just... He stopped. His eyes drifted past me, toward the pile of empty sleeping bags stacked in the corner of the lodge. I turned to follow his gaze. One of the bags was unzipped, halfway open. It wasn't one of the ones the kids had been using. Those had all been rolled up and packed neatly. This This one looked older, the fabric slightly different. It hadn't been there before. I stepped toward it, my pulse hammering. It was empty, but something about the way it lay on the floor made my skin crawl, like it had just been vacated. Mark was right behind me now, staring down at it. You don't think. The bag moved, just a slight twitch, like something deep inside had just finished settling. We both jumped back. I felt my stomach twist, my breath catch in my throat. Did you see that? I whispered. Mark nodded slowly, his face pale. We should have left it alone, and we should have just walked out and burned the entire lodge down for good measure. But instead, I did the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life. I reached down. I grabbed the sleeping bag by its edges and flipped it over. A cloud of dust puffed up from the wooden floor. The bag flopped lifelessly onto its other side. Nothing, no extra weight, no hidden occupant, just an empty bag. Mark let out a shaky laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. Then, I need more sleep. I forced a chuckle, but I wasn't convinced. I still wasn't convinced. We left the lodge and didn't talk about it again that day. But that night, when I went back to my cabin, I double-checked my bed, my blankets, every shadowed corner. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, but then, just as I was drifting off, I heard it again. That same soft, nylon shuffling, not from outside, not from another cabin, from inside my room. I froze, my eyes wide in the dark, a rustling sound, a settling, like something shifting inside fabric. My breath came in short, shallow gasps as I reached for my flashlight. I flicked it on, sweeping the beam across the room. At first, there was nothing, just my clothes, my gear, the faint outline of my packed sleeping bag at the foot of my bed, and then the sleeping bag inflated, just slightly, just enough to suggest something inside had inhaled. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I bolted. I ran straight to Mark's cabin, banging on the door like a madman. He yanked it open, startled, but as soon as he saw my face, his expression changed. He knew. He didn't ask. He just stepped aside and let me in. Neither of us slept that night. By the next morning, my sleeping bag was back to normal, just an empty sack of fabric on my bed, no signs of anything out of place, but I never used it again. In fact, I never slept in a sleeping bag at all after that summer. I grew up in a town where nothing happened. You know the type. One main road, a few stoplights, and a grocery store that's been around longer than the town itself. Emerson's Market. It wasn't anything special, but it was ours. The weird thing about Emerson's, it always closed at 9:37 p.m., not 9:30, not 10, always 9:37, exactly. I thought it was just one of those old town quirks, like the diner that still only took cash or the post office that refused to update its hours. One night, I found out why. I was working the closing shift at the gas station across the street, which meant I had a front row view of Emerson shutting down. That night, I noticed something strange. At 9:35 p.m., the store still had a few customers inside, lazily grabbing last-minute groceries. At 9:36, I watched as every single one of them stopped moving, not like they were waiting in line or checking their phones. They just froze. One guy had a box of cereal in his hand, held midair. A woman by the fridge section had a gallon of milk, still half inside the cooler. Even the cashier stood motionless, her mouth slightly open like she had been mid-sentence. At 9:37, the lights flickered, just once, and then they moved again, like nothing happened. I sat there, gripping the counter, watching as everyone suddenly snapped back into motion. Cereal guy finished grabbing his box. Milk lady pulled her gallon the rest of the way out. The cashier kept scanning items. Business as usual, except now their faces looked, not scared, not confused, just empty. Then I saw him, the owner, Mr. Emerson. He walked to the front of the store, locked the doors, and flipped the sign to closed. And that's when he looked straight at me. I don't know how he saw me across the street, but he did. And he smiled, the kind of smile that says, "You saw something you weren't supposed to." I turned away, pretending to count the register. When I looked back, the store was dark, empty. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the light, my tired brain playing games with me after a long shift. But the more I tried to brush it off, the more it gnawed at me. Why 9:37? A few nights later, I decided to test something. I stayed late after work, parked across from Emerson's Market with my headlights off. My plan was simple: watch and see if it happened again. At 9:35, people were still moving normally. At 9:36, the same thing happened. Everyone inside just stopped, mid-step, mid-blink, mid-breath. At 9:37, the lights flickered. The world resumed. This time, I noticed something new. Not everyone came back. I counted. There were at least 10 people inside before the freeze. When the lights flickered, holy night, the teenage girl by the self-checkout was gone. No sign of her. No one reacted. No one one even looked around for her. I rubbed my eyes, convinced I was just misremembering. But then Mr. Emerson locked up, turned off the lights, and looked straight at me again. He smiled, wider this time. I left before he could cross the street. I tried to forget about it. I really did. But when I woke up the next morning, the missing girl was all over the news. Her name was Rachel Lowe, 17, last seen at Emerson's Market the night before. No security footage showed her ever leaving. I didn't sleep for days. I couldn't. I kept replaying it over and over in my head. If I went to the police, what would I even say? Hey, I think the grocery store eats people at 9:37 p.m. Nobody would believe me, but someone else must have noticed, right? A family member, a friend. The town wasn't that big. People talked, except nobody did. Rachel's disappearance came up once or twice at the gas station, but it was always in a detached, weirdly vague way, like people were talking about a stranger, not a girl they'd seen at school or around town. Then, a few nights later, something worse happened. I was in line at Emerson's Market. I don't even remember going there. I swear. One second I was at home, staring at my ceiling, and the next, I was standing at the checkout, a basket in my hands. I glanced at the clock, 9:35 p.m. Panic shot through me like ice water. My feet wouldn't move. I was inside. I turned to leave, but 9:36 p.m. Everyone around me stopped. The hum of the coolers fell silent. The flickering overhead lights froze in place. I felt my breath catch in my throat, but I couldn't move. I wasn't frozen like the others. No, I could still see, still feel. But my body, it wasn't mine anymore. The door at the back of the store opened. Something walked out. I didn't see it. I didn't want to see it, but I felt it. A cold, suffocating presence, slow and deliberate, moving between the aisles. I could hear its footsteps, heavy, wet, wrong. It passed behind me, close enough that I could feel my skin prickle. And then at 9:37 p.m., the lights flickered and I could move again. I stumbled forward, nearly collapsing against the checkout counter. No one noticed. The cashier just scanned my items like nothing happened. But when I turned to look behind me, the old man who had been in line before me, I dropped my basket and bolted. I don't go near Emerson's anymore. I don't even drive past it if I can help it. But I keep thinking about it. Who decides who stays and who disappears? I wish I could say that was the end of it. That I left town, never looked back, and tried to live a normal life. But if that were true, I wouldn't be telling this story, because whatever happens at Emerson's Market at 9:37 p.m., whatever it takes, whatever it feeds on, it's not done with me. For months, I avoided that side of town, and if I needed groceries, I'd drive an hour out to the next city. If I passed someone carrying an Emerson's Market bag, I'd look the other way. It worked, or at least, I thought it did, until the phone call started, and the first one came at 9:37 p.m. exactly. I didn't recognize the number. I let it ring, no voicemail. Then it happened again the next night, and the next, always at 9:37 p.m. I finally picked up on the fourth night. I shouldn't have. The line was silent at first, not the kind of silence where you can hear breathing, background noise, something, nothing. Then a voice, familiar. You were supposed to stay. My stomach dropped. I knew that voice. It was the old man, the one who had been in front of me in line the night I almost didn't make it out. The one who wasn't there when the lights flickered back on. I slammed the phone down and blocked the number, but it didn't matter. The calls kept coming, different numbers, always 9:37 p.m. Then came the faces. I'd catch glimpses of them in places they shouldn't be. Reflections in store windows, dark shapes standing at the end of aisles, just out of sight. A flicker of movement in my rearview mirror. The first time, I nearly crashed my car. I was at a red light, rubbing my tired eyes when I glanced up at the rearview mirror and saw someone sitting in my backseat, not moving, not breathing, just watching. By the time I whipped around, the seat was empty, but the indentation was still there, like someone had just been sitting there a second before. I tried telling myself I was losing it, that it was all just paranoia, but then Rachel Lowe came back. I saw her in the cereal aisle at a grocery store an hour away from town. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but it was her. Same messy ponytail, same jacket from the missing person posters. I wasn't crazy. She was alive. I almost called out to her, but then she turned, and I saw her face. Her eyes, they were wrong, not blank, not empty, wrong, like they had seen something human eyes weren't meant to see. She smiled at me, not the kind of smile you give an old friend, not even the kind of smile you give a stranger. It was the same smile Mr. Emerson had given me that night, like she knew something I wasn't supposed to know. She walked past me without a word, heading toward the checkout. When I finally got the courage to follow, she was gone. I don't know what happened to Rachel. I don't know if it was really her or something wearing her skin, but one thing's for sure, people don't just come back from Emerson's Market. Alright, but that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But as always,
Have a nice day.